Hello everyone. Today I'm going to continue on with my discussions of the films of 1973, 50 years ago. What did films look like then? How do they look today? And I'm going to talk about a really famous film from 1973. This is Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, starring Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland, from a story by Daphne du Maurier. And its reputation, it got great reviews in the UK when it was released, mixed reviews in the US, but its reputation has greatly increased through the years. In fact, in the recent November 2022 Sight and Sound poll, it ranked 46 on the director's poll. Most of the attention to the Sight and Sound poll was centered on the critics poll, but they also did a poll of directors. And in fact, if they've just released all the lists, you can find them online in alphabetical order by contributors, so you can see what some of your favorite critics and directors chose as their 10 best films of all time. Now, Don't Look Now is about a couple living in a rural community. They lose their daughter in an accident, their little girl, and of course grief-stricken. And their attempt at renewing and sort of restoring some sense of equilibrium to their marriage, they go to Venice, where the husband is given a job to restore an old church. The wife, played by Julie Christie, in an absolutely luminous performance, she appears, at least on the surface, to be the one most affected in having a great deal of problem getting back that sense of equilibrium to her life. And the film then goes into ESP, the occult, the psychic. They're sitting in a restaurant, and two older women sitting at another table. One is blind, and the blind woman has this ESP, this psychic power, and sees this couple's little girl sitting at the table with them, which propels Julie Christie, the wife's character, into a sense of happiness. Now, this leads to what at the time in 1973 was the most controversial aspect of Don't Look Now, which was a very explicit sex scene. It is implied that they've not been able to have sex because of the grief, the shared grief that they felt that they feel over the loss of their daughter, and so Nicholas Roeg made this very explicit scene with simulated intercourse, simulated cunnilingus, but looked very real. So the American censors didn't like it. They thought it went too far. So Roeg intercut scenes during this very explicit sex scene with Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland's characters getting dressed up. The post-coital events where they have to go out to dinner, and it turned out to be very effective. And the sex scene, certainly in 1973, this was really something. Today, looking at it today, you might say, "What was the big deal?" But in '73, we were just. You could anticipate that we're going to see different things in 1973 that in the late 60s, early 70s we had never seen before, with the production code disappearing. But even so, I don't think anybody had done quite as explicit a sex scene, especially with major actors, movie stars. And so much of the sex scenes that we were seeing were basically directors wanting their lead actresses to expose, to go topless. This seems, of all the sex scenes I've ever seen, this seems so integral to the plot, integral to their actual relationship. So there's a very tenderness to it, and the music is very understated, and it turned out to be very effective to do this cross-cutting between them in bed and then getting dressed to go about with their lives. So Venice is used as a set in so many films. Here it's used for its Gothic quality. It's certainly based on a story by Daphne du Maurier, one of the great Gothic best-selling authors. And she liked this film. She sent a complimentary letter to Nicholas Roeg after she saw the film. And this is Venice in the off season, so not a lot of tourists, and it's also a Venice that is undergoing a trauma itself of a serial killer. People are being killed, a murder mystery, and it's a Venice of nighttime, a Venice of dark alleyways. You would say too, this has some, Don't Look Now has some relationship to Italian giallo movies, especially in its use of red. Red is, there are motifs running through Don't Look Now, including the use of red. You see it everywhere. Water, the accident of the little girl involves water. Water, a big motif, drinking water, going on boats through water. And also falling. There's many falls in this film. We are in a precarious position in life, and there's one particular scene where Donald Sutherland he's up on a scaffolding. The scaffolding in this church that he's restoring, and the scaffolding breaks. It's a terrifying scene because it looked like, was this Donald Sutherland doing this scene? And it was, because the stuntman refused to do it. So in reading, I read the Daphne du Maurier story a few nights ago, and it's very faithful to the screenwriters were very faithful to Daphne du Maurier's story. There are a couple of differences. One is that the couple are coming to Venice entirely in pursuit of restoring their relationship, their marriage, and seeking some sort of consolation for their grief. In the movie, the husband is there for work. He's tied to the city in a way that he is not in the short story. And it also has the movie has a layer of guilt because of the accident, and the parents feel like it can be their fault. Now the film doesn't play that up; it's only implied, but certainly it adds an extra layer of grief to the trauma that they have felt. Because in the book, the little girl has died of illness, meningitis, I think it was. So this is Nicholas Roeg's second solo directing film, and he co-directed Performance, but then in 1970 he had Walkabout, and then this film, Don't Look Now, and then The Man Who Fell to Earth, and Bad Timing. These are four really significant films, and Roeg was very much, I think, a director of the 1970s. After that, his career really sputtered along. He made quite a few films after that, but this is really, these four films are really the essential Nicholas Roeg movies. And he uses the fractured storytelling, narrative, editing style, which goes back to a film that he was the director of photography of, Richard Lester's Petulia, I think was around 1968. And Anthony Gibbs was the editor on that, and Roeg was very impressed with Gibbs's. If you've ever seen Petulia, it flits about through time and space, which he used which Nicholas Roeg used in his solo debut in Walkabout. And Gibbs did, in fact, edit both Performance and Walkabout. And also, Roeg's, in these four films of the 1970s, Roeg uses locations so vividly. And so in Walkabout, it's the outback of Australia. Here it's Venice, and southwest desert of the U.S. in Manifest to Earth, and then Vienna in Bad Timing. And the locations are part of this, or the integral part. They're so much integral. They're like a character unto themselves, and they have a sort of appeal, but they also can be seen as a sort of hell on earth. And I think Rogue, and especially in this film, which is a gothic horror film and considered thus, he really exploits that sort of hellish nature. Now, Venice is used, mostly it is used as it is in Don't Look Now as a sort of renewal of a couple's relationship, or in Summertime, Katharine Hepburn's romantic view of the glories of the ancient beauty of Venice. Not so here. This is the Gothic. It's more or less very similar to The Comfort of Strangers, Paul Schrader's film in the early 1990s, which gave the Byzantine quality of the architecture. Here the architecture is mostly gargoyles and sort of threatening and forbidding kind of atmosphere. And I have to mention the music by Pino Donaggio. This is his first score. He had never even contemplated writing a film score till he was asked to do this. He was do Don't Look Now. He was a popular singer and songwriter, and he had great success. He loved doing the film, and this is a terrific score. And he composed several of Brian De Palma's films as well. And I also have to mention, as my eye is always out for character actors, there's a brief scene with a British actor by the name of David Tree. And David Tree was in Pygmalion. This is the 1930s version with Leslie Howard and Wendy Hiller. He plays Freddie, the upper-class, wealthy, sort of dim-witted suitor of Eliza Doolittle. And I've seen Pygmalion many times on stage, and believe me, David Tree is the best Freddie I've seen, and he was also in a number of other significant films, including Goodbye, Mr. Chips. And then he, during his service in World War II, he lost an arm, and so after that, he never appeared in another film again until Don't Look Now. And he was the grandson of, who was it, Herbert Tree, I think his first name was Herbert Tree, who was considered in his day the greatest English stage actor. And the film, the opening scenes at the farm in England are actually filmed in David Tree's farm, because that's what he became. He became a farmer. And Rogue, who was a friend of his, cajoled him into a very small little, but he gets a very good moment in his little cameo. The movie got great acclaim when it was released in the UK. It was the top half of a double bill with The Wicker Man, if you can believe it. And it did terrific business, but when it came to the US, it was much more mixed. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars in his review, but when you read his review, it's basically a pan of the film. But the film was restored later on and released theatrically in the early 2000s, and Ebert then gave it a 4-star rave review. And he still had some reservations from his 30-year prior review, but it was illustrative of how much the film has risen in estimation. And as I say, it was on the top 50 of the directors poll, and many directors have cited Don't Look Now as a big influence on their own career, in the way Ari Aster in Hereditary, who made Hereditary, Danny Boyle. So it's a film. It's a film that today is considered a classic. And having watched it and thinking about it and watching it again, I would say it's quite deserving of that title. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.